In this video, we're going to talk about vectors in R. So far, we've looked at single values. Vectors are a way of holding multiple values in a single object in R. For example, we can use this C function where we type C followed by brackets and then list a series of individual values separated by commas. So we've got 1, 2, 3. This creates a vector of all three numbers bundled together. The thing to note about vectors is that all the data that's bundled together in a vector must have the same type. So all of the items need to be numbers, or in the second case here, all of the items are logical values. There are other ways to create vectors aside from the C function. So with numbers, we can create a vector of numbers that is a series of all the integer numbers from one number up to another number, which we can do with this colon operator, like this. So 1 colon 20 creates a vector of all the numbers from 1 through to 20. And there are lots of functions that will create vectors. So for example, here's one that creates a vector of random numbers. It's called runif, and it's giving, when we say 10 inside the brackets of the function, that gives us 10 numbers in the output. And in this particular case, they will be 10 random numbers between 0 and 1. So far, we've looked at how to get multiple items into a vector, but sometimes we'll also want to get one or more items out of the vector. The way we do that is with something called indexing. You might have noticed when we were printing the contents of a vector that the line started with a number in square brackets. That indicates the index of the first item on that line from the vector. So it's saying that this number 10 is the first thing in this vector X. If we want to get a particular element from a vector, we can put square brackets immediately after the name of the variable that holds the vector, and then put the number of the item. So this will get us the 10th item from X, which if you were to count through the items of X in this first code example, you would find that 19 is the 10th item. If you want to get multiple items, you can use the colon operator, right? So this is giving us all of the items from the 10th item to the 15th item, right? So 19 is the 10th item, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. We can also use indexing to update the items stored at a particular position. So here, for example, we are updating the second item in the vector X, and we're going to set it to be the value 0. And sure enough, then if we print out X, like the second line of code is doing, and we look at the second item, we can see it's now 0 instead of 11. The other interesting thing about R is actually everything is a vector. In previous videos, we looked at creating single values, but really those were actually just vectors with just a single item. If you were to compare the number 1 and explicitly creating a vector with a C function of just the number 1, you would find that they were the same thing. We can also use operators on vectors of multiple items, just like before, how we were looking at, for example, adding two individual numbers together. If we have two vectors here, each of 3 numbers, we can add those 2 vectors together. And the way that works is that each indexed position the items in those positions get added together, right? So in the first position, we've added together the first item from V1 and the first item from V2 in the output to get a total of 5, and so on. Now you might ask, well, what happens if the vectors are not the same length? And so this is where sometimes you get behavior that's a little bit unexpected. And what R does is it recycles the shorter vector. So it just repeats it over and over again until it matches the same length as the first vector. Right? So here we're adding together a vector of 5 numbers, 1 through 5, and here we're adding a vector of just the numbers 1 and 101. What happens is that in the first position of the output, right, we've got the value 2, which we get by adding together the first item here and the second item here, and the first item here. Sorry. The second item in the output is 103, right, which we've got by adding together 2 and 101. But then the third item in the output is the value 4. And so we've started with the third item in this first vector, which was 3. But because the second vector was too short, right, we've just gone back to the start. We've recycled it all over again. And so the first item here is 1, so we've added together 3 and 1 to give us 4, right? And then again here, now we get to the second number in the second vector, which is 101. We're adding that to 4 to give 105. We do also get a warning from R about this, because sometimes you might not be expecting this to happen, right? You might have thought that your vectors were actually the same length when they weren't. And so R just warns us that it is recycling the shorter vector in case that wasn't what you were wanting to happen.